Welcome to this edition of DIY3DTech.com. In this episode, I've had a couple questions about the bed on the CR10, on the Creality CR10. Now, this is a pretty big bed, obviously 12 by 12 inches roughly, and you can see I've got a 12 by 12 piece of PEI sheeting on there. I've removed the glass bed. I print directly onto the PEI attached to the aluminum bed, no issues. However, one of the big questions is how uniformly does this bed heat because of its size? So one of the things the viewer had written in and asked, well, why don't I use the thermal camera, the FLIR over here, as you see off to the side here, to take a look at it and measure, you know, do I have hot spots, cold spots? And I thought that was actually a pretty good idea. So over here, if you can see over there, I've got also a camera set up to monitor the screen of the CR10 and to, you know, measure the temperatures that are going on, so I can correlate the temperatures on the screen over there with the infrared camera and see if I got hot or cold spots over here. So tell you what, let's jump over to the infrared camera and let's start doing some measurements. We're going to heat the bed up and then kind of watch if we got hot or cold spots. So let's jump into the FLIR and see what we got. Okay, so right now we have the bed just sitting at room temperature. I've got the rectal, as you see on the screen there, set at the center of the bed. Now this reflection you're seeing back here, this is actually from the ballast of the fluorescent light above it, so that's really has nothing to do with the bed. So you can see on the screen, well, actually it changed. So on the screen over here, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to select control, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select temperature, and then I'm going to scroll down to bed, and then I'm going to set this to go to 70 degrees C. Whoops. Well, maybe we're going to go to 71 degrees C. And so I've now set that. So the bed should start warming up. We should see the bed start heating up in a minute. And so you can kind of, there you go. You can see the bed starting to warm up. And you can see in the center of the bed that it's definitely warming up far faster. So on the side of the screen, you can see that on the inlay, we're at about 24 degrees C. So it's not a lot of temperature change. But you can see there's actually quite a bit of color difference in the video in the center. Now you can see in the corners that the corners are still quite a bit cooler. And again, you can see the temperature starting to ramp up there in the inlay a little bit. And you can see the back is starting to warm faster than the front. So that's rather interesting. But again, you can see the temperature, as one would expect, is radiating from the center, because you can see again, where the rectal is placed in the center, we're at about almost 36 degrees C, and we're reading about 33 degrees C on the actual controller. And so the thermistor is going to, I think, is near the rear of the bed, so having a little bit of delta compared to the center is not too surprising. So it seems to be running about 3 degrees off of actual, because I'm now at about 40 and I'm reading 37, 38, so it's running about 2.5 to 3 degrees. And again, you can see the front corners are still a little bit off. I'm going to slide the camera over here a little bit so you can see the corners a little bit better. Again, the back is faring much better than the front. Now, I think one of the pieces here that's probably worth note is most of the stuff you're going to print is probably going to be in the center, but if you are planning on using the corners, this might be a little bit of a challenge, especially using PEI sheeting, because what happens is the PEI will interact with the temperature per se. So one of the things is the PEI gets warm, it wants to adhere to other plastics. When it cools down, it's less so and kind of releases, so it does sort of an expand or contract. I think probably one of the interesting things may be to either use a PID setting in the heated bed on a bed this size, or to use some kind of control that, you know, once the bed reaches, or the thermistor says to the controller, hey, I've reached my set temperature, then what happens is it maybe dwells for a couple minutes, or, you know, a minute or two for the heat to spread out, because that's what I want to watch as this is processing along. So you can see we're up to about 54, 55 degrees C. On the controller we're reading about 52 C, and so it's still progressing along. It will take a while for a bed this size to heat, especially since it's using DC. Pretty much at this size, I would really suggest something along using, an AC type current, or a lot of our European colleagues refer to it as mains power. But this is kind of a big bed to be heating up with DC. And again, you can kind of see how hot it is. Now, one of the things, I'm going to move the camera over here to the edges, and so you can see at the edge we're about 55 on this edge, and then if we roll back to the center, you see we've jumped up probably now about 6 degrees or so. Now let's go ahead and let's go over and look at this edge. So this edge, again, we dropped down by about 5 degrees. So there's a fairly good disparity in temperature across this whole bed, about 5 degrees, which is quite a bit actually. And that's why, I would possibly suggest some sort of, dwell type of command after the bed reaches, or the thermostat reaches its temperature, to allow the heat to distribute. Now that's one of the things I'm going to take a look. So we're at about 62 degrees now, and with a target of 71. Why it has a kind of a preset of 71, I don't know. Because again, I'm just using the PLA presets in this. Actually, not the PLA presets, but just the click controls for temperature control, and it's either like, I think, 67 or 71. So I chose 71 in this case, just for example. So again, you can see we're coming pretty close. We're still about 6 degrees, 7 degrees off on the controller. But we're getting very close to the center. Now, I'm kind of interested to see if the center overshoots the 71 degrees. And so again, we're within 2 degrees of 71, but yet we're still showing 5 degrees on the controller delta. And again, let's roll over to the edges and take a look at the edges. So the edges are, again, within about the same type of delta. Actually, I think the delta is actually increasing, because I'm about 62. And then, so this center piece is about almost 71. So as you see, the difference is getting larger between the edges and the center as it gets warmer. So I don't know if it'll dissipate. So again, we see pretty much here in the difference of time, it's probably the same on either side. So we have about 63.1, 63.2. We're reading now 70 on the controller, so we're still a good, 7, 8 degrees off on the edges, which is actually quite a bit. And one of the other things, I might say here, you might want to run it a little bit hotter than maybe normal because of this bed size. So if you're typically at 60, you might want to do 70. I don't really think that's going to hurt with PLA. Definitely, I've had a couple folks write to me about ABS on this thing. I would not do ABS on here because, number one, it's an open frame printer. Number two, the heat disparity in this bed is huge. And I think as we crank it up, the heat disparity will do nothing but grow to the edges. So, again, if you want to print maybe a real small ABS part at the center of this, you might be able to get away with it. Now, we've reached temperature at 71 degrees, and as I sort of anticipated, the center has overshot by about 3 degrees, or almost 3 degrees. Yeah, we're at 3 degrees now, so we're at 74 C. The controller, as you can see, is showing 71 C. And we've now been there for a little bit of time, and I want to see where this keeps going, because again, my temperature is still climbing here. As you see, I'm now at about almost 74 degrees, so I'm about 3 degrees. I've now reached 3 degrees over on the bed. So again, let's take a little bit of a look, but it seems to be stabilizing at about 3 degrees over. So let's take a look at the edges. The edges, I'm still at, in the, mid 60s. And let's go back and look at this edge. And again, I'm looking at mid-60s on the bed. I'm coming back to the center. And again, I'm just a little bit under 74 in the center. And as you guys can again see in the inlay, I'm sitting at about, 71. So I was just looking at the time. So I've been running the clock for about 10 minutes now. And it's taken, I think, about 8 minutes or so to come to temperature. And so I've been at temperature roughly now, non-scientifically, for about 2 minutes. And again, I'm wanting to see if this is, how this spreads. So I want to carry this out a little bit more, if you guys don't mind. But I'm thinking that there's not going to be too much that's going to spread this temperature in this region from the center, from the edge to the center, much more than it really is, because as this is radiating heat, it's just doing that. It's radiating heat, so it's losing heat to its environment. I know one of the viewers wrote about insulating the bed, or the underside of the bed. That could be an interesting option. Something like that I might actually consider, more so for the fact of helping it maintain temperature and use less energy. Because again, if I've got my hand underneath the, I don't know if you can see it out to the corner here. See, I'm putting my hand underneath, and there's a lot of heat escaping underneath. So forcing that up. But however, I think one of the problems or challenges might be is the type of heating. It's like a PCB type heating bed. So I think there's going to be some intrinsic, what do I want to say, insulative factor in the material itself. So it might be hard to efficiently reflect the heat back up through this PCB bed, but I think it's probably worth a try, and it may be something that I try in a future video as I put some sort of insulative material on here. I'll have to do some homework. So again, as you can see, I'm still locked in roughly about 74 degrees, 3 degrees over. And I want to bring it over here, and so I'm still roughly at about 62 or so on the edge. So I think that's pretty much the way it's going to stay. There might be, on a longer print, some leaching of heat, more so to the sides. However, PLA, I don't think this is going to be a big problem with PLA. However, one of the things after doing this test I would recommend, a lot of times I'll run my PLA bed at about 60 degrees C. I think what I'm going to do on this guy is start running it at about 70 degrees C, just so I make over that 60 degree mark, because for me, using this the PEI bed, and you can also interestingly see how my hand is far cooler than the bed, but using this PEI bed, I'll spit it out here, with PLA, I find that my reaction between the PEI and the bed, PI and the PLA happens best above 60 degrees C. So I now know I'm running about 70 degrees C here, and then if I go out to the corners, I still have my 60 degrees C here. So I'm still pretty good corner to corner for PLA. Again, I'm not sure I would do this with ABS. One of the things, since we have this real quick, let's go ahead and let's get interesting. So let's go to temperature, and let's take the bed. Let's see if we take the bed up to 101 degrees. How this goes, because again, now you can see we're sitting here at 75. What I want to do is I want to see, because right now I'm running what? So I'm about 74 there, and about 62, 60, let's say 63. So I'm about 11 degrees delta between the center of the bed and the edges. So if I take it up, let's see what happens with that. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to probably speed this section up a little bit so you don't have to wait through all this, because we've already been running for about 14 minutes. Hey, just wanted to jump back in here and let you guys know, if you're waiting for me to come back, this thing is still heating up. It's been about 15 minutes since I turned it up to 101 degrees. I said I was going to do a time lapse, but I tell you what, this is worse than watching paint dry, because there's not a lot happening. And again, it's been 15 minutes. I'm only at 90 degrees now, so I've only gone up about 30 degrees in 15, maybe almost 20 minutes now. So this thing is taking forever to come up to temperature. So as soon as it gets up to 100, 101C, we'll jump back into the Flir. So let's head back that way. Okay, we're back. So it's been about 30 minutes since I've turned the heat up to 101. And the best I've reached is 92 in 30 minutes, so I don't think anything above 90 is practical, and I'm going to go ahead and say probably 90 itself is on the verge of being practical, because again, it took over 30 minutes to warm up to this temperature. So from 70 degrees, so to go up roughly 22 degrees or so, 21 degrees, it's taken over a half hour, and so this is kind of crazy. So, and I kind of anticipated we'd have this kind of problem with the bed again this size and being DC powered. The other thing is, you can really hear the fan straining inside the unit versus at 70. So, as I said in the first section, I don't think this is a practical ABS printer at all. So, again, my opinion, but so let's go ahead and take a look. So in the center, we're at about 92 degrees. It's fluctuating by about a degree. Now, one of the things, notice the amount of fluctuation. We have far more fluctuation at this higher temperature than we did at the 70 degree, which is interesting. So let's go ahead and measure the outer boundaries. So again, whoops, let's get back on the target here. So about 76 degrees. So we're, let's go 77, so that's what, how far off is that? It keeps moving and I keep changing my thinking. So 80, 90, so 13. So that's about 14 degrees difference. So as the temperature gets higher, the spread gets higher. Also notice that, and again, this has been for like 30 minutes since I've turned it up, and it's been at this temperature probably for about 5 or 6 minutes. And you'll notice that the leaching of temperature isn't that great. Let's move this back in. And we have about the same here. So again, putting my hand here, you can see the difference in temperature between my hand and the bed. And again, if I come back here, if you print ABS on this, I think you'll be sorely disappointed, because you will definitely have lifting and that on this bed. So just not a good bed for, I think, ABS. You know, again, PLA at that temperature, no problem. With the PEI, I think, again, no problem. But, you know, ABS, I think, is pretty much busted on this printer. So I'm going to call it here. So let's jump back. I'll give you my final thoughts on all this, and we'll go from there. All right, so I just want to give you guys my final thoughts on this. So up to about 70C, I think it's okay. Above 70C, not so okay. You know, definitely if you're used to printing at about 60C for the bed temperature, I suggest boosting it up to 70, because you see there's a very clear delta between there and the edges, and especially if you're going to do a large print. Most of your adhesion is typically going to be in the center, and so we clearly see we have that center heating profile. So that's you know, interesting. The other piece is you might want to try, and I think I'm going to also try this, is a bit different thermal mass bed on this, because as I mentioned, one of the things I am, when I get time, going to extend the bed in the Y-axis here by installing a longer center rail, which means I will need a larger bed, because I want to go 12 wide by 16 inches long. And to do that, I'm going to have to obviously come up with a new bed. Now this is about, I think, 1/8 inch aluminum, maybe something like that, attached to the bed. I can't really tell, but without really crawling underneath there, but I think you get the idea. So what I think I'm going to do is I might try going to a bit larger bed, thickness that is, and attach it to this, because again, I'm only going to do PLA on this, and I'm even hesitant of doing a heated bed, period, but I might actually just try it still yet. But I think with a 1/4-inch piece of aluminum sheeting on here might provide a little bit more thermal mass. And I think in the future I am probably going to switch this to maybe a mains type, because it really pulls pretty hard on that power supply over there to heat such a large bed. So hopefully I've answered questions about this. What does the heated bed look like on the CR10? Well, now you guys know. Stick with PLA. And hey, let me know in the comments if you guys think otherwise, you've had different experiences. Subscribe button coming up over there, swag shop over there. Don't forget to get your cool maker swag. Visit the website, and hey, we'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.
Please click like below and subscribe to the channel.